Hi, and welcome to Deep Dialogues, 12 extraordinary conversations I'm having with amazing female soul stewards who at this time are transmitting their unconditional love, empathy, and compassion about the creation of a new level of living, and therefore helping us to form ideas about a brave new world that we can create together. Have a wonderful time listening in. I think we are live. We are streaming. This is wonderful. And so, well, Sandie, welcome to these deep dialogues. Thank you so much for being here. And to all you wonderful people who are tuning in, I know that Ryan is going to exercise the chat box so that we can actually see wonderful comments from you coming in. So Ryan is my technical manager. So anyway, so what I'd love to do is just to provide everybody with a little bit of information about who this wonderful lady sitting here is, because she is très formidable, and I've had the great honor and immense joy of knowing you now for, I think it possibly is about 10 or 12 years, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Because it's when Findhorn Press stepped in and started to publish all of my works, that's when we met, didn't we? And I came to Las Vegas, and you very kindly hosted me on the was it the Light Worker?
Virtual Light Broadcast.
Virtual Light Broadcast. Anyway, so it's a great thrill. But of course, what's interesting, we were just exchanging, everybody, that Sandie normally interviews me, and here she is in this unusual position of being interviewed. So who is Sandie? Sandie is an alchemist, a writer, an explorer, and mentor who has worked as a magazine journalist, an author, and conceptualizer. Sandie has also worked in PR, advertising, direct marketing, as a ghostwriter, publishing consultant, and as a presenter for a number of TV and radio shows, including with the BBC and Virtual Light Internet TV, as well as having a regular column and audio program or podcast on Om Times, which is one of the US's leading Mind Body Spirit magazines. Indeed, Sandie has played a very significant role in shaping and polishing dozens of books, and was a judge for the Independent Book Publishers Association annual Benjamin Franklin Awards for 13 years. From the earliest days of her career as a member of the pioneering team behind Penthouse Forum magazine, to the publication of her fifth book, which is hot on the press, as it were, now, Sex, Lies, and Love, How to Understand the Opposite Sex and Beyond, Sandie has maintained an abiding interest in the psychology of relationships, feminism, sexuality, and sexual equality. To boot, Sandie is the founder of the No BS Spiritual Book Club. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have the most remarkable lady here who was living for many years in the United States and now is back in the United Kingdom, but has had this immense imperial view of book publishing over the last, what is it, Sandie, over the last 30, 35 years?
Yes, I would say so.
When you made the transition from advertising into this particular domain. Which is absolutely remarkable. So you must have seen many changes from the early 1990s.
In publishing, absolutely, yes. Yeah.
Can you say what you feel those main changes may have been?
Well, of course, I mean, since Amazon came on the scene with its Kindle, everything changed. Once upon a time, as you probably know, self-publishing was you just did not do it. It was considered vanity publishing, and nobody worth their salt would touch it. Nowadays, it's highly respectable and even highly recommended. In fact, I think, I'd go so far as to say you can often do a lot better self-publishing than you can by the traditional route.
Wow.
So it's leveled the playing field and allowed so many people, to play and to get seen.
And of course, we know that many new writers are having to turn towards self-publishment because the publishers, the establishment, is seeing that they want to keep their hold on conventionality rather than moving into some of the hybrid creativity that's coming forth, particularly about the supernatural world and the domain of near-death experience, for example. What do you feel is necessary to happen within the major publishing companies for them to ease off the patriarchal bite?
I really do think that they need to change their model. They need to make it more equitable for the authors. You know, nowadays, I tell people all the time, you know, if you go to a publisher, what you get is you'll get credibility and you'll get distribution. You won't necessarily make any money. You won't necessarily have any control. You know, so why do it? If you've got a platform already, then you might as well do it yourself. And I've actually guided several people through that very, very successfully. And they've done much better publishing their own books than they've done having them published by known publishing houses. And the problem is, it's, you know, the market is so volatile in many respects. And I think a lot of the large publishers are afraid to take risks. I mean, they've always been a little bit of, you know, it's a bit of a gamble, always is. But these days, they want everybody to have a platform. If somebody doesn't have a platform, how do they even begin? And what actually happens is you see a lot of people publishing their own books. And if they market successfully, promote successfully, and sell quite a lot of copies, then the publishing houses will come to them and say, now, how about coming with us? So it's kind of reversed everything. And, you know, the whole thing is a little bit upside down. But the good part about it is that anybody now can become an author. Now, will they become a successful author? That's another story, but anybody can have a book published.
It's very liberating, isn't it? And I mean, you know, I don't really want to go into my own story, but of course you know it intimately in terms of what I've shared with you about the book that I've just produced, which was held in mighty acclaim by one or two leading publishers, but then immediately just dropped without any reasoning. And then shenanigans with another publisher. That whole story will have to remain confidential, of course. But then out of defiance, my statement was, well, you know, after all, the whole nature of the genre that I'm writing through is really about the immense celebration of what the divine feminine is all about, particularly in relation to Diana. And for anybody who's listening, wondering what book have I written, it's Diana, the Voice of Change. So it's literally about the last 2 years of Diana's life, written not as a social diary, not as a kiss and tell, and not as a you know, a sort of royal journal. It's actually delving into the very essence of who was this woman who found herself in this unique privilege, or if you like, this rather unusual predicament, and how she began to see a way of releasing herself and liberating into a new way of being. And so, you know, the very fact that I actually brought it out myself and it became an international bestseller in 4 days, I'm absolutely thrilled. And I don't think we've talked about it, but we have just, my agent and I have now gained US publication.
I'm not surprised.
You see, so that's the way it's going to work. However, so, you know, you've actually had through your hands and have polished and processed so many outstanding talents. Have you deduced that there are certain favorites? I don't mean in terms of the people, but the subject matter that they've been writing about. Have you felt yourself particularly inclined to certain themes, or is your taste still very polyglot?
Well, mostly I tend to work in the spiritual arena, spiritual memoir, people who have dealt with various ill health, tragedy, whatever it may be, and they've moved through it in a natural, spiritual way. Spiritual teachers, people who have invented cutting edge technology that one might say is woo-woo, but actually has a real basis in science and in history. So I tend to move in that direction. I don't work on, you know, the average romance novel or a fantasy novel. People don't come to me with those. It's not something that I I wouldn't necessarily turn it down, but it's not my area of expertise. But I'm attracted to a story and the author. You know, it's the energy. It's whether this story is actually going to help people. If there's something in it for others, rather than I just want to tell my story, then I'm attracted to that. And I really like to help promote people who I feel have a voice that would go unheard otherwise.
And over the years, have you discovered that there are particular themes? Do you have anything that you are inclined to particularly within the whole scope of mind, body, spirit, or I guess what we're calling the human potential movement?
No, I mean, you know, all of the books that I've worked on have been quite diverse. No, you know, some have had a hell of a lot of scientific research that I've had to do if I've been ghostwriting. You know, the science of sound and light and lasers and technology and frequency, and you know, and I love research. Others, it's been just a case of helping somebody really refine the way they're telling their story. You know, I like to help authors learn to write. So it's a coaching session at the same time as well. So I will often give them examples. I'll often rewrite passages for them. Say, you could say it like this, or you can take apart what I've done and find your own way of saying it. But no, there's no particular theme, I would say, that stands out beyond any other. I mean, I loved working with Jim Self on his books because he's such a masterful teacher, and he's got just a wealth of knowledge to share with people and so many tools. So I like to be able to be involved in a project that gives people something that they didn't have before, a way of moving through the world. Whether, you know, and you know, by the people that I interview, I don't necessarily interview all the big names. I get offered a lot of them. Some of them I don't want to interview. Some of them I will interview. But it's really ultimately about, you know, what has this person got to say that could be of use to others?
Mm-hmm. And it feels to me, knowing you in the way that I do, that it's always about a remarkable affinity that you feel either with the person or with the subject matter, or both. And may I also say, what I've always been so fascinated about your professional expertise is that you always have this beautiful curiosity about learning more or interpreting more or seeing more and allowing that vision to be broadened for the readership. That's what I've always found very, very wonderful about you and remarkable. Whereas my traffic with a number of the publishing editors that I've met, that they've been immensely inhibited by their own particular demands within publishing, or reductionist. Well, the only way we can do it is this way. Yes. No, you know, I remember the first book that I wrote, which also was written by an editor, you know, that I had a manuscript, but it was handed into the hands of an editor who did a very, very good job. But I remember the publisher, who will remain nameless, kept on saying, but it has to be for Mr. and Mrs. Blocks. It has to be W.H. Smith. And they just happen to own W.H. Smith. And I was thinking, well, I really don't feel, you know, I mean, to begin with, as a new writer, I was writing something which was far too austere. And it was, the title was the secular and sacred purpose of the human voice, you know, which is, it's an academic thesis, isn't it? You know, it's not actually a book that's going to sell on shelves. And then when they said, well, do you have a subtitle? I said, yes, The Alchemy of Voice. They said, let's call it that. And then we went ahead. And of course, that was the first book that then went through the huge retraction period of 2008, and then Findhorn Press took it on and asked me to put the soul back into it, and so forth and so forth. However, so it always feels to me that you're very drawn towards the like, or the relationship, or the response worthy, or the affinity that you feel with the people that come your way. And what I've noticed is that so many of the people that I've felt have been in the wonderful, warm, loving grasp of Sandie's hands, that they've always become immensely confident and clear in their transmission, whether that be through the printed word or any of the paraphernalia. And I don't mean that in any slighting terms, the paraphernalia that we get caught up in today to develop our audience, in terms of internet communications and videos and the whole social media thing, which is all very exciting as far as I'm concerned, and I'm learning as I go. You've always been there helping them define their image and to define their particular, as it were, their house style, their USB. And you obviously have fun doing that. Is that true?
It is true. I have a very simple philosophy. I call myself a shameless sharer. If I come across something that I think, wow, that is so interesting or so useful, I can't not share it. And that's why I do radio. That's why, I like to showcase people, because if I'm excited about it and I regard myself as Mrs. Average Person, then others will be excited, and therefore they need to know. And how are they going to know unless, we all share it? So for me, that's the thing. It's got to excite me. And I love learning. I could spend my whole life just doing research. If somebody wanted to pay me to be a student, that would be fantastic. I love learning. I don't think I'll ever stop wanting to know more about the universe, about us, about just about everything. And if I get an opportunity to share something that I'm learning, it's new to me, and I think it can help people in their daily life. It's got to be practical. It's got to be useful. It can't just be intellectual. You've got to be able to take it into your daily life and do something with it. And when I was writing my books, which, I haven't written a book of my own for a number of years, and 2 of them got serialized in the Daily Express. I write for the average person. It's got to be simple. It's got to be easy to understand, because if it's not, people will just leave. They'll be out of that book straight away, and they're not going to get the message. So you just make it simple, make it easy, make it something someone can understand. But also, as far as the authors go, I regard, you are the genesis point for everything that you produce. It comes through you. Whatever the source is, it comes through you. Therefore, your voice is so important. So this is what we have to encourage, is it has to have your imprint throughout it in order to be authentic, and other people will feel that authenticity.
So in fact, that's one of your guiding principles, isn't it? Yeah. Which extrapolates beautifully in relation to what's happening at this time, post-COVID, virtually. And now here we are after this global pause, getting back to a flow of economy. We're in the United Kingdom. Retailing has opened today on June the 15th. And then in a month's time, in the middle of July rather, I understand that most restaurants and cafeterias will open unless there is for some reason another insurgence of this terrible pandemic. And it seems that one of the guiding influences, or one of the guiding principles at the moment is, well, where is the truth? Where is authenticity? And when you're reviewing a new writer's work, is that one of the major points of stimuli that you're looking for? How grounded is this? How real is this? How authentic is that?
Absolutely.
I don't know if you can share anything about authenticity on that level and how crucial it is today as a determining factor for us all moving forward.
I think when I was involved in advertising, and I got into advertising purely because I was producing a magazine, and at the time we were turning something into a magazine that had been a very successful nationwide newsletter. And at the time I was doing everything while we were going through this experimental process. And I got involved in advertising as well as everything else. And later on, when the magazine had very successfully made its transition, I was invited by a direct marketing agency that had clients that they'd had for 30 years, mail order clients, to come and breathe new life into what they were doing. And what I'd learned is I love people. You know, I'm endlessly curious, and I love learning, you know, why people think the way they think. Psychology is a big passion of mine. And one of the things then, you know, with the magazine I was able to do was we were one of the first people to start holidays with our readers. And I would go and meet those readers because I want to know who they are. And I think connection and communication is one of the most important things we have in life. You know, it feeds us on a level that I don't think many people truly understand. And so I've always been about connection and communication. So in advertising, one of the first things I did when I was confronted with a lot of these mail order clients that had, you know, let's say, for example, a seed catalogue or a beauty health catalogue, and they'd been selling products to these, you know, an audience for years, is why aren't you communicating with these people, you know, in ways that give them value for money? They're buying product off you. If they're buying seeds, why aren't you giving them a catalogue that gives them a seed planting calendar, you know, information that they're going to have to find anyway in order to plant your seeds? This way, not only are you giving them much greater value for money, but you're actually encouraging their loyalty. You know, you're giving them more than they're asking for. And this becomes a wonderful two-way relationship then, rather than you just selling them, not knowing who they are. They're just a number on a balance sheet. And at first I had a lot of, no, that's never going to work. You know, we have a formula, we produce this seed catalogue, we can't give away editorial. You know, we have to make every single inch of the page count. I actually proved them wrong. And so this thing about, and it took me years to understand that I love people. I want to communicate with people, and that's driven me in everything that I do. It comes out in all sorts of ways that I didn't understand then that I do now. And over the years, I've watched marketing become so slick and soulless. You know, you pick up the phone, you want to speak to somebody at the other end of the phone, and you've got a machine. And they say, the machine is telling you, we really value your business. But they don't. They're not going to tell you necessarily how long they're going to expect you to wait, but their staff are busy and we're really too busy to speak to you right now, but hang on for another half an hour. You know, and people are sick of that. People want connection with a human being. And you can't feel authenticity when you're talking to a machine. You just can't, it's just not there. So this whole thing about authenticity, you know, I thought about it a great deal, and I realized that, you know, the kind of marketing that I want to practice is what I call resonance marketing. It's knowing who that person is. It's really connecting with the person. If you, Stewart, in what you do, can connect with a reader or somebody who wants to come on one of your tours, or somebody who wants a session from you, if you really connect with that person, you're seeing them and they feel seen and heard. And that's all we all want at the end of the day, is to feel seen and heard. And there's what I call a vibration of authenticity, a frequency, and it's like a straight line. It goes straight from your heart to their heart. And they don't know what it is they love about you, but you know, they open up to you. Now you've got a customer or a client for life, or you've got somebody who is going to be your advocate and tell all their friends. You don't need to sell. You don't need to advertise. You don't need to be slick and soulless, because you're communicating on that thread. And that's all we need. You know, we know what we like. We know who makes us feel good, and we want more of that. So for me, authenticity is everything. So getting somebody, you know, into a place where, number one, if they want to tell their story, it has to be authentic. Don't tell me that you want to write a book because you want to become a famous writer or you want to become a spiritual teacher. If I don't feel that from you, I can't work with you on your book. It's that simple. Because you're not in alignment with who you really are.
Mm.
And if you're not in alignment with yourself, how can you be in alignment with anyone else?
Mm.
So for me, this whole authenticity thing, it is a feeling, you know, and it's a frequency, and it's the beginning and the end of it all. You know, the first time I came across you, I read your book, The Alchemy of Voice, and I got very excited by what I learned about that in that book. And I got very excited by what other people could learn about themselves and how they could improve their own lives. And that's why I was drawn to interview you for the first time, and then to start sharing you with my clients as well and have them interview you. And that, the authenticity that came through that book for me was a bridge. And straight away, then I wanted to read everything that you produced. And I wanted to share that as well, because of the authenticity. It's very, very simple. You know, if we're not going to be authentic, then, you know, we're not necessarily going to be whole, and we're not going to be in alignment, and we're not necessarily going to succeed at what we do. And I think people are craving this now more than ever. They're craving connection, contact, communication. And yeah, I mean, what else is there to say?
Well, it's brilliant. I mean, what a wonderful section of oration, you know, because there you are in this wonderful flow. And of course, I completely concur, completely concur, because the whole raison d'etre of my work, stimulated very much by years and years and years of being an actor, but, you know, then latterly helping extraordinary actors to find the core of what authentic communication is all about. And of course, for them, it's actually all about relationship.
Yeah.
Meaning that although, well, it depends on what values one has about the actors that one knows, but the actor knows fully well that the only reason why they can shine and be radiant is if they make their fellow actor absolutely amazing. So there is this amazing consanguinity, you know, this exchange that's going on. It's almost as though blood is being exchanged.
Yes.
Breath is being exchanged, whether it be comedy or tragedy, whether it be something which is conflicting drama or very naturalistic prose, you know, the sort of stuff that we see on TV. It's all about relationships. So finding ways of being able to release the ego so that we get to the gold dust deep inside, to the love deep inside, is something that I've been doing for many years. And so it's wonderful to hear that there you are also championing the cause, because after all, in relation to what you've shared with us, it's the only way forward more and more and more and more, because we're beginning to see that the agency of transparency that is brought about through the literature that you're helping to shape and polish and produce, in alignment with all of the social media instrumentation, so to speak, that it's all about transparency, authenticity, truth, integrity, so that it holds a mirror up to nature.
Yeah.
And we begin to see how we can heal some of the paradigms that are still existing within the old regime, which is not necessarily, as we've seen through COVID, about authenticity. It's about obfuscation. It's about obscurity. It's about holding people in fear rather than allowing them to move forward and have extremely exciting and harmonious relationships, communion with one another. For me, it's all about belonging. I feel people are really yearning to belong to something that is not manipulative or engineering a certain way of being, but purely and simply because they see, as you were saying earlier, that there is empathy or sympathy in the person's eyes before them.
Yes.
And you know, are there any, as you dwell on the whole substance of authenticity, are there any other significant themes or social dynamics that you would like to see emerging more and more and more within the, as it were, the mouthpiece of the writer's talent that you're assisting into glory? Are there any major themes that you would like to come forward in this new paradigm development, particularly in the arousal of the divine feminine?
Well, this is a huge subject, and as you know, you've been privy to, I'm working on something at the moment that is definitely, it's more than just about the divine feminine. I think humanity has lost its way, and we've been lost for thousands of years. And I think that we have forgotten, and I'm talking about all of us, and this isn't male or female, this is an energetic thing, that we have lost touch with something really fundamental. And people talk about the divine masculine and the divine feminine. I think it goes much further and deeper than that. I think those words have become little cliches that people, you know, they hang a kind of picture on that and they get sidetracked by that. But the essence of who we are, I think, is love. The essence of who we are is love. And we have, over the centuries, lost our ability to love ourselves and love one another fully. We have been taught to fear. Just today, then this is a slight digression, I was talking to my daughter-in-law about, you know, the situation with the kids being off school, and she was telling me about her son had one of his first play dates in a long time, out in the open, in the woods with another little boy. And she said when the other little boy joined them, it took him 4 minutes before he could even look at my grandson in the eye. In the 3 months since he's been off school, something has happened to that child, which has made that child frightened and constricted and restricted. And I said, the thing that worries me most about what's going on is, and all of the separation, is that we are all being taught to fear one another. And, you know, we're seeing this with the Black Lives Matter right now, but you know, it's beyond that. It's we are being taught to fear the person next to us. Doesn't matter what color they are, what culture they are, we are being taught to fear one another. And I think this is the most dangerous thing that can happen to us as a species, because the minute that happens is, you know, we lose even more of that love. Fear and love cannot exist in the same place, you know, in the same space. You're either in fear or you're in love. You can't be in both. And that really concerns me. So I think you're asking me a big question and I can't answer it in the way that I would like to, because it would take too long, but I can pick a couple of tiny little examples of how I think this is influencing us right now and the danger that exists within it. And I don't know what the answer is, because we are in this situation that, you know, has killed a lot of people, and it is polarizing all of us. You know, some people think that it's the most terrible thing that's ever happened, and we've really got to put that first, and others think it's no big deal, and you know, they want to carry on as normal. And that's a debate, you know, you can't really win that debate. So, you know, I don't want to dive into that too much. No, and I don't think I'm addressing what you asked me.
Oh no, you've addressed it absolutely, because, you know, I'm sure the listeners and the viewers are able to see that actually what you've done is to go to the very heart of the matter, which is that our lives are really all about love. And if we bring in its opposite in the form of fear, although a lot of people will say that hatred is the opposite of love, that in A Course in Miracles, it says that fear is an hallucination in the face of the redeeming magnificence of love. So really what you're giving us is a tool to get wise about love, in the sense of, well, there's an interesting idea, which we know is at the very core of our beings, and therefore develops the greatest authenticity, because the only way that we can be authentic is if we care about people. and we care about ourselves. And then how do we begin to stimulate all the other social dynamics that go with the expression of it? Because the idea then needs to become a deed. And this is where I come in, of course, you know, when I constantly talk about human behavior and how what we need to do is to, as we begin to reestablish our values from a dying system and develop a new hierarchy of values at the very core, if you think of it as a crown, the jewel in the crown is love. So what we need to do is to just simply become wise and imaginative and ingenious about all the varying devices that we can use to express love. I meet lots of people who have been coming to me recently, lots and lots of people, because of this crisis that we're all facing. And there are many conspiracy theorists who are very simply so angry, and they're trying to find a way of rationalizing their anger by blaming and accusing through conspiracy. And so when they come online, because obviously I'm not seeing people in the flesh at the moment, well, I am, but it's all via Zoom or Skype or WhatsApp. I listen to them and I let them rant, because obviously it's important for the ranting to take place, for the expression to take place, so that I can begin to see how can I shape the energy. And once they've spoken, sometimes they could go on and on and on and on for half an hour. And then I stop them and say, okay, wait a moment. I just need to understand, what is my role in this? Because at the moment we're not having a conversation. You're just talking at me. So do you want me to say anything, or do you just want to go on? Because if you want to just carry on, then you can. But I really feel that I'm being irresponsible to you as a professional coach, as a wise counsel, as the person that you've come to meet me for. And then they say, oh, well, I never thought about that. And I said, well, tell me, before we go into another aspect of conspiracy theory, how many compassionate deeds have you done today, or indeed this week? And they say, what do you mean? What compassionate deeds? Now, how many loving deeds have you done? And I'm just talking about very simplistic things. For example, have you held the door open for a lady or a gentleman? Have you helped a young mother with her pushchair up an escalator? Have you stopped the escalator doors from the elevator doors from closing as a young mother? Have you thought about going into your community and knocking on the door of a senior citizen and saying, I'm really sorry I haven't said hello, but may I say hello? And is there anything you want me to do? And they always look at me aghast, because they've lost the ability, rather like the dear child that you were talking about, who in just 2.5 months has learned fear. So even for a peer, you know, because how old are these babies? They're young.
Oh, they're 9.
Yeah, I mean, they're young.
Mm.
Of how they need to be re-educated back into that sense of, not necessarily back into fearlessness, but back into, if I perpetrate this particular act, if I give this person something, they're going to give me something in return, which hopefully will be in favor of what I've just given them. So I feel that what you've just said is absolutely monumental. Now we know that the social phenomenon and the ways of social phenomenon that have taken place just in these last 2.5 months in relation to COVID have been extreme. And it's very difficult to talk about them right now because we're still experiencing them. And when we just get through another half a month, when we get into the beginning of July, and we've had these 3 months that we can review of April, May, and June, that then perhaps retrospectively we can evaluate more keenly the social phenomena that has occurred and why has it occurred, you know, why it has occurred. Because it seems to me that the fear came up initially, and then the fear was intellectualized by conspiracy theory, and now it's moved into immense anger, which is another expression of fear through the violence that we're seeing, particularly in US cities, which is also beginning to ask huge questions about the whole substance of racism. And I know that you very kindly introduced me to Iyanla Van Sant, and when she comes into dialogue with me in a couple of weeks' time, that's something that we're going to talk about. And she has some amazing insights into racism, and particularly from a karmic point of view of what is the spirit of racism and what is the spirit of slavery. And why are the perpetrators cast within the role that they are? And then, of course, the evils that they do or the ill deeds that they do are perceived to be creating victim consciousness. So we have some very fascinating aspects to go through. But back into the preserve of the book and the new book. We talked about the values that you see coming through, but what I find so fascinating is that so much of your work leans into the psychology of relationships. And over the years, you must have experienced all sorts of different forms of relationship, whether it be you personally or you observing. And I just wondered if there was any particular highlight that you were, that stirred you or moved you, or that you thought about or felt in relation to the whole substance of what you've learned about relationships over the years.
Well, one of the reasons that I'm working at the moment on this anthology of essays about men, women, divine feminine, masculine, feminism, sexual equality, how did we get into this place, is about 30 years ago, I wrote, as you said, a book called Sex, Lies and Love, How to Understand the Opposite Sex. And at that point in time, I was very interested in relationships, why we're attracted to certain, why we don't open ourselves up in relationships, all of it. I'm just fascinated at why people do and behave and think the way they do. But I wanted to see what had changed in the 30 years. Because when I wrote Sex, Lies and Love, How to Understand the Opposite Sex, that was at a time when there was lots of men's groups starting. Men were beginning to, want to soften up and go inward, and John Bly, Iron John, and all of those. And I was shocked by some of the behaviors and the ideas and the attitudes that the genders had. And I really wanted to see if something had changed. And what's really upset me is how a lot has changed and how nothing has changed. And in fact, there's even been, a kind of devolution, if you like, in some respects. And love and fear, again, are at the bottom of this. I interviewed Riane Eisler last year, and she's the author of The Chalice and the Blade, which came out in the 90s, an incredible book. And she's now written a book called Nurturing Our Humanity. And now they've actually got the neuroscience to back up a lot of what she's been writing about domination societies versus partnership societies. And one of the things that I was absolutely shocked to come across, that I'd never really understood, was that in a lot of domination societies, which are very patriarchal, they try to do as much as they can to stop people from loving one another. Arranged marriages, because they don't want the man to love the woman, because if he loves the woman, it weakens him. And I was absolutely shocked to discover that. We talk about naive in thinking there could be other reasons, but that, if you try to stop love, then you're stopping everything, and if you bring children up not to experience and feel love, then what are we doing to society? We're taking away our humanity. We're taking away everything that is fine and good and expansive, and we're closing ourselves off from one another. And if you do that, how do we live? Because if we don't have openness and communication and connection, then we have nothing. And it's just one thing, going back to what you were saying about what we've experienced in the last 3 months. One newspaper headline has stuck with me, which was probably, I think I saw it about a month into lockdown, and that was the older generation, who've been told, stay away from your grandchildren. And there was a headline that said, if we can't see the people we love, then what is the point in living?
Mm.
And I thought, well, that says it all.
Mm.
You know, I mean, are we so afraid of death that we will give up our lives in everything that makes life worth living just in order to stay alive? And the stupidity of that, you know, I mean, what do we do with that?
Well, it's an irony, isn't it? It's a huge irony. And that begins, in my consciousness, that begins a huge question of the purpose of this entire experience that we've been through, and how we're now beginning to see through very legitimate claims. And in fact, an American neuroscientist who I'm working with, he is my client at the moment, has sent me the most extraordinary video, which I need to look at later after our conversation, because he's asked me to comment on it tomorrow. And it's a video of a remarkable nurse who was trained originally in the military and saw, you know, had the experience of being in Iraq, had the experience of being in Afghanistan, and then decided that she wanted to become a registered nurse within state hospitals, which she did. But of course, she's had this heroic career of working in these extraordinary war-torn situations. And the story, I think there's a story in her experience where she was actually shot. So she also became an injured medic. And she was asked if she would be an undercover agent in one of the principal hospitals in New York City, which has been the epicenter of the epicenter in the United States of America. And the video is of all of her findings. And all of her findings suggest that the fear that has been used to control people into allowing them to believe that they actually have COVID when they don't is astonishing. Now, I haven't gone into the absolute substrata of what the video is all about, but it's an hour-long expose from a woman who is actually, she has a hidden camera on her that is interviewing doctors, and she's considered to be a first-class nurse, you know, so she's given extraordinary responsibility in intensive care unit. I mean, I have a client myself who's an amazing doctor who's been with me for a very long time, who just happens to be a consultant virologist. And he comes to me so that we work on subtle energetic processes, particularly in relation to the metaphysics. But of course, our conversation is always about the balance between metaphysics and physics. And so, of course, you know, being a consultant virologist, there he is in 2 major London hospitals and watching the pandemic beginning to develop. And so at the beginning of the lockdown, he said, would I go in and shadow him for a day or 2 days per week, which is what I've been doing. So of course, I've gone through the protocols of being checked myself, and I'm very, very, very healthy, and then masked up. And I literally just stand behind him and shadow him by watching the energies and working as an intuitive and providing with information about how he can help this individual, help that individual, particularly with the dying. However, the reason for me, that's just context, the reason me sharing the story is to do with the fact that the amount of fear that has been produced is the thing that is actually producing the disease and is sustaining the disease. And as soon as the individual is given some form of allopathic therapy or kindly therapy, empathic therapy, they automatically begin to produce the phagocytes that work through the blood to improve respiration, so that the COVID virus doesn't have, you know, has that, when you see it under a microscope, it has those extraordinary little claws that hangs on to the pleurae or hangs on to the alveoli in the lungs. It begins to cease its hold. Now, really what we're talking about, as soon as we release fear, we move back into love. And of course, you know, these first care workers have been absolutely extraordinary. I was, when I said goodbye a couple of weeks ago, because I would, you know, it was no longer necessary for me to go in, I'd done whatever I needed to do. The whole of the nursing team came in tears and said, thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. And I said, why? Why are you so moved? A, because you are extraordinary, Stewart, but B, because you showed us such care and such honor. You showed us so much authenticity. Anyway, so I could go on and on and on about it, but we're really talking about where we've identified themes. So how can we go about really increasing human behaviors so that our deeds are seen to be a way of living forth and bringing this crisis to a close, so that we can begin to develop the new brave world that we want to live in, or the brave new world that we want to live in, to quote Shakespeare. And of course, in relation to all of this, part of the wonderful irony and humor that you have is that you've created this wonderful no BS spiritual book club. Now, where did that come from?
That literally dropped in front of me one night after a radio show, when I get pitched books all the time, and I obviously read thousands of books, and I had been aware that I was getting pitched a lot of books. There's a lot of kind of neo-spirituality, you know, people standing on the shoulders of people who've gone before, and I understand that, you know, we all need to hear things in different ways, but I was getting fed up with the lightweight marshmallow spirituality that was being presented to me, and it didn't feel authentic. You know, it was stripped of some of its original essence, and it felt as though, to me, as though it was somebody who just wants to be, you know, spirituality is going mainstream, and it's a very attractive, you know, arena, and it's a very lucrative arena now. And there's a lot of people who, what a great way to get famous. You know, I'll be a spiritual teacher, a spiritual author, and I've seen so much of it, and it was just beginning to get to me. And I think one night after a particular show, I just threw my hands up in the air to the universe, and it was like, oh, you know, I'm so done with some of this. I want the authentic material. You know, all of this lightweight stuff is distracting people who are waking up from the really good stuff that's out there. And it just dropped in as if somebody put a picture in front of me and said, look, look. And I looked at it and I thought, wow, what a great idea. Somebody should do that. But it wasn't going to be me. But it wouldn't go away. And I spent a year just looking at this concept and thinking, should I do it? No, I don't want to do it. Should I? Shan't I? And I was just playing with ideas and websites. And in the end, it just became very clear it was mine to do. And so I started the No BS Spiritual Book Club as a counterpoint to some of the more lightweight, less useful material out there. And it can't be about me because I'm just one person. So I decided I know a lot of people, people I respect, people I know, authentic, who've, you know, walk the walk, talk the talk. And I'll invite them to tell me, you know, give me your 10 best books that helped you the most on your journey. So if people really want to know, obviously there are the classics that are out there. We've all heard about them, the 4 Agreements and The Power of Now and books like that. But I wanted to create a library, an ever-growing library of books that other people have said, that was so useful to me at this particular part of my journey. And so that's the basis of the book club. I also once a month give my own particular, what I call the bookworm. It's the book that stuck in my mind this month that I want to share with everybody, because I think, wow, there's some good stuff in this one. But the whole point of it is that people have somewhere to go. If they want to know what is worth reading, go over here, read what these people have, you know, these great teachers. What was it that helped them? And maybe, you know, something on their list will help you. So that's what it's all about.
This is wonderful. So can you mention for the listener, for the viewer, can you mention where they need to go to discover more about your remarkable work, and particularly in the No BS Spiritual Book Club?
Well, it's kind of a sub-site on my own website, which is simply sedgbeer.com, my last name, sedgbeer.com, and there's a menu tab. I wasn't sure if this was going to fly, so I didn't create a website all on its own. It's part of my website, and they can see the No BS Spiritual Book Club on one of the menu tabs. They can look at the 10 best archives. They'll find you. They'll find lots of, Iyanla Vanzant, some great people there.
I was about to say, I will make sure that your website details are in any of the future broadcasts, in the sense of the recording of our conversation will go up tomorrow. And so I'll make sure that all of the information that people need to get to you is there. But what I wanted to ask was, the sort of people that you've actually had report what their 10 best books are, because you've had some extraordinary people. Could you perhaps mention a few names?
Dan Millman, he was just wonderful in coming forward straight away. And, what's interesting to me is how many people have said, what a great idea. Love the idea. Dan Millman, Iyanla Vanzant, Stewart Pearce, Penny Pearce, who is just an amazing writer. Dava Premal, who is just an incredible woman, and her partner Miten. There's lots of people who aren't quite so well known, but I really respect them, and I do interviews with them as well afterwards about their list, so that we can go a little bit deeper into their story. And some of these people who aren't very well known, they've got the most incredible stories. So, this is me being nosy, getting an opportunity to, exercise my curiosity about what has helped other people on their spiritual journey. I'm trying to think of some of the names. Jeff Hoppy from the Crimson Circle, which is a huge international organisation. I can't remember half of
And
them.
Lee Harris.
Lee Harris. Oh, Lee. Yes, of course. And it's just wonderful talking to them about the beginning of their spiritual journeys, and what was it that woke them up, or what was it that moved them along. I mean, absolutely fascinating. So I'm having great fun with this, and it is completely free. It is completely free. So, anybody can go there and hopefully dig around into the archives, have a look, and get some ideas of books they want to read. Of course, the downside of it is I've now got a growing list as well of books that I must read on top of everything else that I'm reading.
I know the feeling. I know the feeling. But you see, again, I just wanted to address the issue of going back to the fundament that we were talking about, of the development of relationship, the development of keen authenticity, to thine own self be true. To be true, being true and transparent in our relationships, whether they be personal or professional. It's all about getting back to the glorious revolution of what love is all about.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating for the viewer, for the reader, is that there you are interviewing these extreme talents in the field of human potential, who are very well served as far as their writing capabilities are concerned. And of course, as we know, a number of other people like Dan and Iyanla have their TV shows and are often seen on Oprah and so forth and so forth. But what's wonderful about your take is that you, being you're able to take them into this off-camera private moments where they reveal the internal dynamics of who they are and how they become the spiritual seekers. What did you call it? The shameless seeker?
Shameless sharer.
The shameless sharer. Say that 6 times fast. That's quite a tongue twister. They become shameless sharers. That automatically we get into the very crux of what this is all about, the very crucible of what it's all about. And so, unfortunately, we're going to have to finish, but and I think something's gone wrong with the chat box, because I see there are very few, there are no questions here. We've talked so much about the significant aspects of this what I'm calling the revolution of empaths. And you know, you've talked so much about the neo paradigm issues that are coming forth in many of the MBS magazines. I wondered if there was any particular outstanding virtue that you prize above all others that you would like to encourage people to really investigate so that it can become this beautiful trophy as we come out of COVID and affects all of our lives.
Well, that's a hard one. I don't know that I could. I wish you'd told me in advance. I could have given it some thought. You know, there's two things that have come out of this conversation, you know, that I'm very aware of, that are really important, I think, for all of us. They're important for me, and I think for every single human being. And, you know, we've said the words over and over again: authenticity and love. You know, if you're in fear, you can't be authentic because you're constricted. You're holding back all the time. You're on guard. You know, love is, when we love, we're so open that we can't be anything other than authentic. And I think, you know, what I would want to encourage people is, don't let go of that. You know, don't let go of that openness that we feel when we are experiencing love and we're filled with love and we're able to be authentic. Because I think we're going to need so much of that moving forward.
I hear you. That's a beautiful note to finish up our deep dialogue on this evening. So I want to thank you tremendously. And maybe add an addendum, a subtle addendum to our listeners, which is that now you've heard these wonderful words that Sandie has shared with us, why don't you create a list of 10 loving deeds that you can commit yourself to in the next hour, or if you wish, because we're at 9:30 in the United Kingdom, so we're moving into a mid or late evening, depending on what your activities have been. Why don't you engage in them tomorrow as a steadfast project for this week, just as Sandie will be reading another book so that she can actually produce the wonderful, shameless information that she can produce in her search for that point of inquiry, which is, you know, where is the essence that moves all of us into harmonious relationships? So to all of you that have listened in to the wonderful Sandie Sedgbeer, I say namaste, namaste. Thank you for listening in, and I look forward to seeing all of your comments on the Facebook page. And of course, there will be another conversation next week. I will make sure that Sandie's information is on every single post. But next week we have another wonderful conversation at the same time, again with a series of amazing women in celebration of their own unique authenticity vis-a-vis the arousal of the divine feminine or the sacred feminine at this time. So join us next week, and I will look forward to seeing you. Thank you so much for viewing.